Warm light crept through fractured eyelids as Elias felt awareness return in careful stages. The first thing he sensed was quiet, not emptiness but a patient, intentional stillness. Cold stone pressed through his back, yet pain did not follow, only a dull memory of it. He breathed and the air tasted thin, metallic, and faintly sweet like snow over copper. When his eyes finally opened, shapes resolved into towering arches carved with alien geometry. A presence sat close enough that he felt warmth against his arm without being touched. Instinct urged him to move, but something calmer told him to stay exactly where he was. She was the first thing he truly saw, pale luminous skin framed by silver hair cascading like water. Her eyes were an impossible blue, deep and ancient, holding galaxies of restrained thought. A crown of interlocking black metal rested against her brow, grown, not forged. Beside her leaned a smaller figure, a child, mirroring her features with softer uncertainty. The child's hand rested on the woman's armored knee, fingers clenched with careful trust. Neither spoke, yet their attention wrapped him completely, not threatening, not cold. Elias realized then that he was not a prisoner, but a guest who had slept too long. Memory returned in broken flashes, the crash, the burning sky, the weight of failing gravity. He remembered dragging himself from twisted metal across white ice under violet stars. After that there was darkness, and a voice not spoken but felt, urging him to hold on. Now that voice seemed to sit before him, given form in regal stillness. He swallowed, and the sound echoed too loudly within the vast chamber. The child flinched slightly, eyes widening, then relaxing when the Empress did not move. Elias raised one trembling hand and stopped halfway, uncertain of every rule here. The Empress inclined her head just enough to acknowledge his movement. Her expression did not change, yet warmth radiated from her gaze like a contained sun. "You are safe," she said, and her voice resonated inside him rather than in air. The words carried patience layered with authority earned through centuries of survival. Elias tried to speak, but his throat protested with dryness and unfamiliar gravity. She noticed instantly, and gestured with two fingers toward a hovering vessel of light. Cool liquid met his lips, restoring strength along with clarity he had forgotten possible. As sensation returned, Elias noticed the armor she wore grown to her body like living night. It bore no scratches despite the age he sensed within it. The child's attire echoed the design, though simpler, less severe, shaped for learning, not war. Their species was not monstrous, not unknowable, just profoundly other in elegant ways. HFY stories never prepared him for this level of quiet dignity. He realized then that they had stayed beside him through unconscious hours or days. No restraints, no guards, only watchfulness and an almost reverent patience. "Why?" Elias asked finally, and the single word carried exhaustion, gratitude, and fear together. The child looked up at the Empress, then back to him, curiosity replacing caution. The Empress considered him as if weighing constellations against a single fragile life. "Because you chose to stay," she replied, and the meaning unfolded slowly within him. Images flickered of him sealing a breach, diverting power to civilian pods instead of himself. He remembered the choice made without thought, without hope of reward. His chest tightened as he understood that they had seen everything. The Empress shifted slightly, and the chamber seemed to adjust around her movement. "My people study outcomes, probabilities, sacrifices," she continued, voice steady. "Your kind does something else entirely, when there is no gain to be found." The child leaned closer, listening, absorbing every word as lesson and legacy. Elias felt suddenly exposed, as if his most private instincts were on display. "I didn't do anything special," he said, though doubt colored the claim. The Empress's gaze softened, and that frightened him more than anger would have. "To choose others over survival is rare," she said, "even among stars." Her words carried weight that pressed gently rather than crushed. Elias felt pride stir, unwilling and unfamiliar. The child smiled, then a small, unguarded expression of wonder. It struck him that she was seeing humanity for the first time through him. The thought terrified and humbled him in equal measure. Somehow his single act had become a story already being taught. He shifted, testing his limbs, and found strength returning beyond expectation. The Empress noticed again and nodded permission rather than command. He sat up slowly, meeting her gaze on equal height for the first time. The chamber opened behind her, revealing distant mountains and falling snow. This world was harsh, beautiful, and alive with quiet resolve. "You healed me," Elias said, understanding finally settling into place. "We preserved what you gave us," she corrected, and the difference mattered. Silence followed, not awkward but full, carrying shared understanding across species. Elias sensed that this moment marked the beginning of something irreversible. Not a treaty, not an alliance, but a story rooted in choice and memory. The child studied him as if committing his face to heart rather than mind. The Empress rose slowly and extended one armored hand toward him. "When you are ready," she said, "you will stand with us." Elias accepted the hand, knowing humanity had already taken its first step here. Elias steadied himself as the Empress's grip supported his weight with effortless strength. Her armor felt warm, alive, responding subtly to contact as if recognizing intent. The child stepped back just enough to give him space, eyes never leaving his face. When he stood, the chamber seemed less vast, no longer pressing down on him. Tall windows framed a frozen valley where light fractured across ice and stone. He realized gravity felt slightly lighter, tuned for bodies not his own. Despite that, his legs held firm, as if something within him had already adapted. The Empress released his hand only when she was certain he could stand alone. They moved together, not walking so much as flowing along the chamber floor. Servants did not appear, yet doors opened and paths revealed themselves. Elias sensed that the structure responded directly to her presence. The child walked on his other side, close enough that their shoulders nearly touched. Her silence was curious rather than fearful, filled with questions left unspoken. Beyond the arches, the air grew colder, carrying distant wind and mineral scents. Elias felt awake in a way deeper than consciousness, as if purpose had sharpened him. Every step felt like crossing a threshold he could never recede from again. They emerged onto a terrace overlooking a city carved into the mountainside. Spired structures grew organically from rock and ice, glowing faintly with inner light. Bridges arced between them like frozen waves, defying collapse or decay. Far below, beings moved in slow, deliberate patterns, each motion purposeful. No panic, no rush, only coordinated existence shaped by long survival. The Empress rested her hand on the balustrade, and the city seemed to breathe. "This is Kethra," she said, and the name carried history like snowfall. "My people endure here because we choose restraint over conquest." Elias absorbed the view, struggling to reconcile its beauty with what he knew of the galaxy. Human records spoke of expansion wars, burned systems, and silent ruins. Yet here was a civilization that had chosen stillness over dominance. The child followed his gaze and tilted her head, sensing his confusion. "You expected ruins," she said softly, her voice clear like chimes. Elias nodded before realizing she had spoken aloud to him. "I expected scars," he answered honestly, and the Empress regarded him closely. "We carry them within," she replied, and the city lights dimmed momentarily in response. They descended along a spiraling ramp open to the elements. Snow drifted across Elias's path, yet did not melt on his skin. His body registered cold, but without pain, as if insulated by unseen design. The Empress noticed his glance and spoke without turning. "Our healers altered nothing permanent," she said, "only reinforced what was already there." Elias wondered what that meant, but sensed the truth would unfold in time. Below them a gathering formed, not a crowd, but a quiet assembly. Eyes lifted toward him, not with awe but measured interest. At the base of the ramp, they stopped before a circular platform. Symbols etched into its surface pulsed faintly as Elias stepped forward. The child took her place beside the Empress, hands folded with practiced poise. A murmur passed through the gathered beings like wind through crystal. The Empress raised her hand, and silence deepened instantly. "This is the one who chose others," she declared, voice resonant and calm. Elias felt heat rise to his face, unaccustomed to such focus. He stood still, trusting the moment not to devour him. Images rose around them, projected into the air with startling clarity. Elias saw the failing ship again from angles he never witnessed. He saw alien vessels retreating, civilians evacuating corridors he had sealed behind him. He watched himself stagger and fall alone beneath a collapsing hull. The child inhaled sharply at the sight, fingers tightening together. The Empress did not look away even when the image showed his expected end. Instead, she watched the choice itself replayed again and again. "This is why he lives," she said, and the images faded. The gathering did not cheer, did not bow. They acknowledged the act with a collective inclination, heads lowering briefly. Respect here was not loud, it was enduring. Elias felt something settle within his chest, a weight that steadied rather than burdened. The Empress turned to him, eyes searching, not commanding. "Our future shifts because of moments like this," she said. "My daughter must understand that survival alone is not victory." The child lifted her gaze and met Elias's eyes without hesitation. "I am Lyris," the child said, and placed her hand over her heart. Elias mirrored the gesture instinctively and gave his name in return. Her smile widened, just slightly, pride flickering across youthful features. The Empress watched the exchange with quiet satisfaction. "You will remain with us for a time," she told him. "To heal fully and to teach what cannot be recorded." Elias considered the implications, Earth protocols, unknown expectations. Yet the thought of leaving now felt wrong, incomplete. As dusk settled across Kethra, the city lights brightened like constellations. Elias was guided to quarters overlooking the valley where night storms gathered. The Empress lingered at the threshold, her presence filling the space. "You may leave when you choose," she said clearly. "But know that choice itself binds us more than obligation." Elias met her gaze, understanding at last the depth of her intent. Humanity had been noticed not for power, but for principle. He lay down that night, aware the galaxy had quietly changed around him. Elias woke before the city's artificial dawn as pale light crept across the valley below. The sky shifted through unfamiliar hues, slow and deliberate, like a thought being formed. He lay still, listening to the distant wind threading between spires and bridges. There was no alarm, no schedule imposed, only an invitation to rise when ready. His body felt whole, stronger than memory suggested, yet unmistakably his own. The room carried subtle warmth shaped by unseen systems responding to his presence. For the first time since leaving Earth, he did not feel like an outsider observing survival. He felt like a variable newly introduced into an equation that had long resisted change. Footsteps approached, not heavy, not hurried, and the doorway softened open. Lyris entered carrying a small crystalline object held carefully in both hands. Her posture mirrored what he had seen of her people, composed, attentive, purposeful. "I was told you would be awake early," she said with quiet confidence. Elias smiled, recognizing the universal curiosity of children regardless of species. "What do you have there?" he asked, pushing himself upright. She held it out, and the crystal unfolded into shifting patterns of light. "It is a memory seed," she explained. "It holds moments, not facts." He reached out, hesitating, only a breath before touching the surface. Images surged, not visual alone, but emotional, layered and rich. He felt the cold of Kethra's earliest winters, the fear of extinction pressing inward. He felt resolve harden into tradition, into restraint, into survival shaped by patience. The seed withdrew gently, leaving him breathless and grounded. Lyris watched his reaction with intent, eyes absorbing every detail. "This is how we learn who we are," she said simply. Elias realized then what the Empress meant by teaching what could not be recorded. Later he was guided through the city not as an exhibit, but as participant. Artisans paused their work to acknowledge him with brief nods. Engineers adjusted living structures, coaxing energy through ice and stone. No one asked questions directly, yet he felt inquiry everywhere like pressure on skin. Lyris remained at his side, narrating customs, histories, moments of pride and regret. She spoke of ancestors who chose isolation over dominance after witnessing cosmic collapse. Her voice carried no bitterness, only clarity shaped by hard lessons. Elias listened, recognizing parallels to human debates echoed across centuries. They reached a lower district where the mountain opened into a vast chamber. Within it rested vessels ancient and new suspended as if dreaming. "This is where we remember why we do not expand," Lyris said softly. She gestured toward a scarred hull bearing the marks of distant conflict. Elias sensed loss woven into the metal, a warning preserved through time. "My mother believes your kind stands at a similar crossroads," she added. The weight of that statement settled heavily between them. Elias understood that his single choice had been interpreted as signal, not anomaly. That evening he was summoned to the Empress's council chamber. It was smaller than expected, intimate rather than imposing. Advisors stood in a loose circle, their expressions thoughtful rather than severe. The Empress regarded Elias with the same measured warmth he had come to recognize. "We have received signals from beyond our perimeter," she said without preamble. "Others have noticed the disruption your survival created." Elias felt a chill despite the chamber's warmth. HFY stories always warned that attention was never neutral. A projection bloomed showing vessels of unfamiliar design converging slowly. "They seek leverage, not alliance," one advisor stated calmly. "They believe humanity can be influenced through singular examples." Elias realized then the danger of being symbol as much as person. The Empress turned to him, eyes steady. "You did not choose this role," she said, "but it has found you nonetheless." Elias met her gaze, feeling the familiar tightening before difficult decisions. "What do you need from me?" he asked, already knowing the answer would not be simple. Silence followed, not oppressive, but respectful. "We need you to remain yourself," the Empress replied finally. "To show them that humanity cannot be reduced to leverage or spectacle." Lyris stood near the wall, listening, her expression serious beyond her years. Elias felt fear stir, then resolve rising to meet it. Humanity's strength had never been in unanimity, but in stubborn moral sparks. He nodded slowly, accepting the path unfolding before him. Outside the city, the storm gathered energy, reflecting the tension within. The storm broke over Kethra with a sound like distant drums echoing through stone. Elias stood on the terrace, watching lightning fracture the sky into pale shards. Wind carried ice crystals that stung his face yet sharpened his focus. Behind him the city remained calm, lights, steady systems adapting without alarm. He had learned that panic was considered wasteful here. The Empress joined him, her presence grounding like gravity returning after drift. "They will arrive within one rotation," she said quietly. Elias nodded, already feeling the weight of approaching consequence. The council reconvened beneath the mountain as external sensors tracked movement. The vessels were sleek, aggressive designs optimized for projection, not endurance. Their formation spoke of intimidation layered with calculated restraint. "They believe fear accelerates compliance," an advisor observed. Elias studied the display, recognizing patterns from human history. Predators often mistook patience for weakness. "What happens if they demand custody?" he asked carefully. The Empress did not answer immediately, and the silence was telling. "They will not take what is not given," she said at last. "But refusal may invite escalation." Elias exhaled slowly, feeling the familiar edge of responsibility sharpen. "I won't be used as proof or bait," he said evenly. The Empress inclined her head, acknowledging the boundary with respect. "Then we will answer them with truth rather than force." Lyris watched from the chamber's edge, absorbing strategy like inheritance. Elias realized this moment would shape her understanding of leadership forever. Preparation was subtle rather than martial. Communication arrays tuned resonance instead of weapons charging. Elias was briefed not on battle plans but on principles. Speak plainly, maintain agency, refuse theatrics. The aliens expected fear, bargaining, desperation. Humanity would offer steadiness and refusal to perform. As the vessels entered orbit, the sky above Kethra glowed unfamiliar hues. A request for audience followed, immediately encoded with layered demands. The Empress accepted without delay, and the chamber shifted configuration. Light folded inward, forming a projection space rather than portal. Figures appeared, tall, angular, armored in reflective alloys. Their leader spoke with confident cadence calculated to dominate. "We acknowledge your survival," it declared, eyes fixing on Elias. You represent an asset of considerable narrative value. Elias felt anger rise then settle into clarity. He stepped forward before the Empress could respond. I represent myself, he said, voice steady, carrying across translation layers. I made a choice without witnesses or reward. The leader tilted its head, processing resistance. You survived because you were preserved, it countered. Elias met its gaze unflinching. I survived because others chose restraint instead of conquest. The chamber hummed softly, amplifying the truth without embellishment. Lyris watched, eyes wide, understanding crystallizing. The leader attempted reframing, threats veiled as concern. Elias refused each angle without hostility, without fear. He spoke of humanity's fractures and stubborn compassion. He spoke of mistakes and the refusal to let them define the future. The Empress remained silent, allowing him the space to speak fully. Finally the projection flickered, recalculating expected outcomes. This interaction yields no leverage, the leader admitted. Withdrawal protocols initiated without ceremony. When the connection severed, the chamber exhaled collectively. Not victory, not triumph, but preservation of intent. The Empress turned to Elias, eyes reflecting something like pride. You chose again, she said simply. Lyris stepped forward and placed the memory seed into his hand. For when you leave, she said, voice steady despite emotion. Elias closed his fingers around it, feeling legacy settle. Outside the storm began to clear, revealing stars undisturbed. Morning returned to Kethra with a quiet that felt earned rather than assumed. Elias stood once more on the terrace, watching the last storm clouds dissolve into light. The sky revealed layered colors that shifted slowly, as if the world itself were breathing. Behind him the city resumed its rhythms, uninterrupted by what might have been catastrophe. No banners, no announcements marked survival, only continued purpose. He realized this was how endurance looked when it had nothing left to prove. For the first time he understood why the Empress valued stillness over spectacle. Strength here was measured by what never needed to happen. He spent his final day walking the city with Lyris at his side. She asked questions now direct and fearless, no longer circling uncertainty. What does your people fear most? She asked as they crossed a narrow bridge. Elias considered before answering, feeling the weight of honesty. We fear becoming less than our better moments, he said quietly. Lyris nodded, absorbing the thought, as if it were fragile. She told him of her own fears of failing memory, of choosing comfort over duty. Their conversation felt less like farewell and more like continuation deferred. At the summit chamber the Empress awaited, dressed not in armor but ceremonial weave. The living fabric shimmered with histories encoded in pattern and tone. You will return to your people, she said, not as command but recognition. What began with one choice must continue with many. Elias felt the truth of it settle into his bones. He was not meant to stay preserved in reverence. He was meant to move, carrying weight and responsibility outward. Humanity would not grow through shelter, but through engagement shaped by restraint. The departure vessel stood ready, sleek, minimal, designed for passage, not display. Lyris hesitated, then embraced him briefly, her gesture careful but sincere. Remember us accurately, she said, and the request carried immense trust. I will, Elias replied, knowing memory was the most fragile alliance of all. The Empress placed her hand over his heart, mirroring his species' gesture. You are welcome here, always, she said, but never bound. Elias bowed deeply, not out of submission, but gratitude freely given. The vessel doors closed, sealing a chapter without ending it. As Kethra fell away beneath him, Elias activated the memory seed. Not to relive, but to anchor what must not be diluted by distance. He felt cold patience, resolve, and the quiet courage of restraint. He understood now that HFY was never about dominance or destiny. It was about choosing others when no one was watching. As stars stretched ahead, he prepared to carry that lesson home. The galaxy would not change loudly, but it would change honestly. And humanity would be seen not as conqueror, but as conscience.